It's a new track. It's a new track. I'm not sure what else to say. Hello, my name is Alex Does F1 Stuff and welcome to my race weekend review for round number 9 of the Tuscan GP around the circuit of Mugello. Formula One's first new circuit of this weird and wacky and sort of wonderful 2020 season. And as always, we will start with the little contents page, if you will. Skip to whichever section you would like me to talk about, or if you want to sit through the whole 35-ish minute video where I go over everything, go for it. But it is currently Friday, so we will be going over the practice results, practice 1 and practice 2. So let's head into FP1, and it sees Valtteri Bottas take top spot from Max Verstappen in second and Charles Leclerc in P3. An absolutely mega showing for Ferrari, and that seems to sort of be on pace, I suppose. The first, I think the top 15, the top 15 were all on the soft tyre. I know we don't know 100% what fuel they're using and if they're doing long runs, and if they're not doing long runs you're not 100% sure, but definitely to see Ferrari in the top 5, that is impressive. And AlphaTauri as well, AlphaTauri, the team of the hour, and Pierre Gasly, F1's newest victor, F1 victor number 109 is P5 for the AlphaTauri squad. They did well in practice last week out in Monza, and now they seem to be doing okay again. Hopefully they can continue this pace forward, as they did seem to drop back through the Italian Grand Prix and sort of, I don't want to say lucked into the victory, but they didn't really seem to have the pace that they showed in Friday or on the Friday's running. It just sort of disappeared, and hopefully that doesn't happen this weekend. But looking a bit further down the order, we have Ocon sandwiching between the two AlphaTauris, then it is Norris in P8, with Albon though, P9, and he's a long way off of Verstappen, over a second. And he's got a whole bunch of riff-raff crap in between him and Verstappen. And that's one of the largest gaps we have ever seen. I know it's a brand new circuit and whatever, but still, that's such a big gap. And then to a team that I don't think I've seen this high in practice, Alfa Romeo, P11 and P14. A solid start to the weekend. And like I said in my pre-race review, this race sort of nullifies the Ferrari power unit car's disadvantage in terms of the power unit, and it sort of allows them to actually be slightly further up the grid, and that shows. They are P11 and P14. Even the Haas's are in there as well, 12th and 17th, with Vettel 13th. They're thereabouts. It is a good showing from them. However, Racing Point. I don't know. What went on with Racing Point? Hard tyre running, definitely. But you'd have thought they would at least be in front of some of the other cars. But then to be 3/10, like they're not even close to Magnussen or Russell or Sainz or Giovinazzi. They're 3/10 off. And I'd have thought with their car, with their pace, even on the hard tyre, they would have at least been a little bit quicker than that. So it's not the start at all that Racing Point were after. After the news that they had signed Sebastian Vettel, the 4-time Formula One World Champion is off to Racing Point, or Aston Martin as it will become known. But if we head on in to practice number 2, it is once again the Mercedes at the top, with Valtteri Bottas seeming to have the edge over Lewis Hamilton this weekend so far. But again, we've seen that this year, that Bottas has sometimes had the edge in Friday and sometimes qualifying. But then he's just lost it in the race and something has happened, either a bad start or Hamilton has just outraced him. So hopefully this weekend he can actually stay in front. We've then got the two Red Bulls in 3rd and 4th, with another 7/10 gap from Verstappen to Albon. But at least there's no riffraff in the middle between the two, but it's still 7/10, as Renault find themselves 5th and 6th, and once again turning up the wick in practice 2. So perhaps Renault may actually be the team for the outside podium contention, possibly, if that's what you want to call it. But Racing Point have definitely come back in a quick way, 7th and 11th. I still feel they want to be up with the Red Bulls or definitely in front of the Renaults. But, I mean, 7th and 11th, that's a massive, massive improvement from where they were in Practice 1. And once again, we have an incredible showing from the Alfa Romeos, who Raikkonen has actually broken into the top 10, P9, and the fastest Ferrari-powered car in front of Charles Leclerc, with Sebastian Vettel in P12 after actually having some engine issues and stopping near the end of the session, but he still managed a mammoth 39 laps in the Burgundy. I was about to say in the Scarlet Ferrari, but in the Burgundy Ferrari. However, McLaren. I don't know what's up with McLaren. Sainz was P15 last time out in Practice 1, and now they're 13th and 14th. I can understand Norris as he crashed, and he's only done 9 laps. But still, to be 13th and 14th, and even in Practice 1 they were outside of the top 10, it's a little bit strange, because I'd have at least thought them to be maybe in the lower reaches of the top 10, maybe not quite at the Renault's pace, but to see them down here, that's a little bit disappointing. And again, the AlphaTauris too, they have gone a little bit backwards, just a little bit backwards, 8th for Gasly and 15th for Kvyat, with the Williams pair doing okay, not too bad, in 16th and 18th. With Haas all the way at the bottom, Magnussen on pace, and Grosjean though having an electrical issue, only managing just 5 laps. So all in all, considering this is the team's first running at this Mugello circuit, it's a pretty interesting lineup we've got so far. Ultimately, yes, we've still got the Mercedes out in front with the Red Bulls in second place, team-wise. But that midfield is definitely going to be interesting, and that's the thing that everyone's looking at this year. We're just ignoring Mercedes and Red Bull. Probably like we've done since 2014. Ignore the top teams. We look at the midfield now. But what F1 really should have done is they should have taken away, like they've done for Imola, with no Friday practice. They should have done that for Mugello, Portimao and Imola. All 3 of the new circuits, they should have taken away the Friday practice running, just to see what that would actually do. Because yes, it's nice and good and awesome that we're testing it at Imola, but we need to see more of the impact of how that's going to work. But anyway, that is Friday's practice running done. Join me tomorrow on Saturday for Practice 3 and qualifying. And Practice 3 is all done and dusted, and it is Valtteri Bottas who takes top spot once again. And for the first time in his career, he has led all 3 practice sessions ahead of a Grand Prix weekend. Unless you count the Japanese Grand Prix weekend of 2019, where the Practice 3 session was cancelled, and then he only led Practice 1 and Practice 2. If you don't count that one, then yes, this is the first time in his career that he has led all 3 practice sessions, and it looks like he has the better over Lewis Hamilton. But Max Verstappen is P2, just 17 thousandths behind, with Lewis Hamilton just under a tenth behind Bottas. It is extremely close at the top, with Red Bull a genuine threat to pole position. And we have Racing Point, P4 and P6, a massive, massive step up from their Friday running, and back to where they were at the beginning of the season. I think it was Lance Stroll testing some new aero parts, simply on the basis that he is higher up in the championship, and that's how Racing Point decided on who was getting the new parts. And it shows that he is just about 0.3 quicker than Sergio Perez. And we have the 2 AlphaTauris doing a mega job. Gasly, P5, continuing his strong form from Friday as well, and definitely a Q3 contender, along with Danny Kvyat also. We've got Charles Leclerc, P7, a mega performance. But Alex Albon down in P8, a full second behind Max Verstappen, just when we thought that he was getting comfortable, just after the Italian Grand Prix, where he seemed the most comfortable that he has been in that team for his year that he has been there, over 2 seasons. It's sort of all gone to shit again, and he's back to being a second off of Max's pace. But looking a bit further down the order, the teams that had a bit of a crappy weekend were Renault and McLaren. 11th and 17th for Renault, and 12th and 19th for McLaren. Can't get much worse than that. McLaren haven't looked comfortable at all this weekend. I don't think they've even broken into the top 10 just yet, and if they have, it was only as high as 8th or 9th. They've definitely not seemed comfortable, with Renault actually having some promising pace in practice 2, but as it has so often been this season, they have lost it come Saturday. And then all the way down at the bottom of the order, we unfortunately have George Russell, who had a brake issue or a brake-by-wire issue on his installation lap and was not able to set a time. But with practice all done and dusted, and with potentially one of the most exciting qualifyings we have this year, with the top 3 oh so very close, and AlphaTauri joining the fight in Q3 along with Leclerc, the Racing Point, Albon and even a Haas, we head towards qualifying. And let's jump straight on in to Q1. Pierre Gasly is out. Pierre Gasly is P16, just half a tenth off of Sebastian Vettel in his Ferrari of getting into Q1. The man of last weekend, the master of Monza, is out in Q1. An absolute shit show, considering he's been top 10 for practice 1, practice 2 and practice 3, and now he finds himself P16. Oof. But Kimi Räikkönen has made it through for the 3rd time into Q2, and I think the 2nd time in a row. I'm fairly sure he did it at Monza. If he didn't, he did it all the way back in the race before Monza. So definitely a improved performance for that Alfa Romeo squad, with George Russell actually having an off, a massive off. He looked comfortable for getting into Q2 on this lap, and it actually looked in threat, like what's his record of not being out-qualified by his teammate, as Latifi was P13 at the time, and Russell was genuinely looking like he wasn't going to get through. But then he managed to put together a storming lap. But this happened. He went off, and the commentators thought, that's it, George Russell is out, and for the first time, he's been out-qualified. But he managed to hold it together, stay flat out through this next section of corners, which unfortunately I don't know the names of, or the turn numbers either, and he managed to go quicker. Unfortunately not Q2 pace, but pace enough to beat Latifi. And unfortunately for the 2nd race in a row, we have Kevin Magnussen and a Haas on the back row of the grid. And with Leclerc sat in P6, we have some genuine potential to see a Ferrari get into Q3 for their 1000th race. And with that, we head to Q2, but it is Lando Norris who we start with today, P11, and for the first time this year, and I think for the first time in 11 or 12 races, he is knocked out of Q2 and will not progress to the top 10 shootout. But it is Charles Leclerc who has made it through in P9 for Ferrari on their 1000th race, the only Ferrari powered car to make it through to Q3, as I have so often said in these reviews before. Vettel though can only manage P14 behind Kimi Räikkönen. Yet again, this has happened a few times this year. I'd have to look at the actual details of my tables to see exactly how many times he's been out-qualified by Räikkönen, but definitely to not even make it through to Q3 like Leclerc has done, that is appalling. Appalling was a very strong word there, I just mean slow. And for the 2nd time in succession, we see a Haas with Romain Grosjean this time at the bottom of the timing sheets, P15 and out in Q2. And so with Q2 done and dusted, with the 2 Mercedes going through as always, the 2 Red Bulls making it through, the 2 Renaults, the 2 Racing Points, Leclerc and Sainz, we head to Q3. And it is Lewis Hamilton who bags himself his 95 career poles. That is insane. He could hit the century this year. He's already taken 7 out of 9 pole positions possible this season. And it is Valtteri Bottas who lines up alongside him, just 59 thousandths covered those two, one of the smallest pole position margins we've had this year. And Max Verstappen finds himself P3, probably closer than he'd have expected, I think, just over 3.5 tenths of a second, with Albon locking out the second row of the grid for Red Bull, but he is still 5 tenths back. I had to do some quick mental arithmetics. I was about to say 6 tenths, but that's not right. 5 tenths back still. It's not the 1 second that it was in practice 3, but still half a second is enormous. And massive props to Charles Leclerc, P5 for Ferrari. A mega performance to be in front of the Racing Points, the Renaults and the McLaren as well. To be just 3 tenths behind one of the Red Bulls, that was an incredible performance. And to be honest, he only gained about 3 tenths from his Q1 time to his Q3 time, compared to the Mercedes, which gained about 6 or 7 tenths. It was a marginal improvement, but it was enough to see him all the way through to Q3 and P5. And speaking about the Racing Points, P6 and P7, I think they'll be happy with that, as I believe they've got better race pace than the Ferrari. And starting in front of the Renaults and McLarens, this is a fantastic opportunity for them to score some big points tomorrow. They just need to capitalise on it and not bugger it up on strategy. But Esteban Ocon had an issue. He spun in Q3 on his one and only quick lap, which buggered Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas said in his post-race interview he felt like he was on a pole position run. I don't know exactly the sectors and the sector breakdown in Q3, but definitely the yellow flags caused by Esteban Ocon caused Valtteri Bottas on his final run to slow down. And with Ricciardo only P8, I think they've massively hit above their target, to be honest. I don't think they were imagining Q3, at least Q3 for both cars, and to be in front of both McLarens with one car and just one McLaren with 2 cars, I feel that is a massive boost for them in terms of the race, and looking forward to it to hopefully bag some more points. But Carlos Sainz, I feel he was another driver to get caught up with the Ocon incident, as he was 1.3 seconds off of Ricciardo. I know the McLaren hasn't seemed at all comfortable so far this weekend, but managing to get it through to Q3, it's clearly not that bad at this circuit. But to be 1.3 seconds off, something must have happened. I'm just not aware of what. And with qualifying out of the way, we will have to wait to see what happens tomorrow for the race around Mugello. I would say another very exciting race. As I've made that video about excitement and what exactly makes a Formula 1 race exciting, I would personally call Mugello also 10 out of 10, like I called Monza 10 out of 10, but they're 10 out of 10 for 2 very different reasons. But anyway, with that little intro out of the way, here is the race result. Lewis Hamilton won from Valtteri Bottas in second place, and Alex Albon picks up his very first Formula 1 podium, with Daniel Ricciardo 4th, then Sergio Perez, Norris, Kvyat, Leclerc, Raikkonen getting his first points of the season, and Vettel is your top 10. But we start with a first lap incident. I'm going to go over the 2 incidents, as I don't really want to start with a team, as it won't quite work. So I'm going to go over the 2 incidents and then move on in to the team reviews. So yes, an incident sort of caused by Gasly. Monza master Gasly sort of sandwiched between Giovinazzi, Magnussen, and then as a concertina effect that hit Verstappen, who had a dreadful start after he had some issue on the start. They had the side pod off due to some, I think they said it was a electrical issue, something to do with the power unit. He then derated on the start straight shortly after starting, very similar to Rosberg in 2016 when he derated going around turn 3 and then Hamilton had massive overspeed on him, causing the crash. It was very similar in this case, however there's such a long run to the first corner that when he derated, everybody flew past him. And that chucked him down into P10, P11 sort of realm, and then he was rammed by Giovinazzi. So after just 3 corners, we had ourselves a safety car. The red safety car, actually. As it was noted in the event notes for the Tuscan Grand Prix, that all drivers must be aware that the safety car colour is now red, which I thought was a nice little addition. But anyway, after this safety car period, there was another shunt. We had about 6 or 7 laps under the safety car, and then there was another massive crash, which caused a second safety car, and then the first of 2 red flags. So this incident involved 4 cars in particular: Sainz, Magnussen, Giovinazzi again, and also Latifi. However, lots of people seem to be putting the blame at Bottas's door, and at first glance I can kind of see why they would think that, as the safety car was coming in after the safety car period after the first lap incident, and Bottas becomes the de facto safety car. He dictates the pace, and he was comfortably going down the start straight, weaving as he does, still nice and slow, hasn't decided to go as he hasn't yet reached the safety car line. And even before he starts racing, before he even reaches safety car speed, this crash has already happened. As I believe from watching the onboards, it was Latifi who ended up going first, thinking that the race was already green. There were green flag boards, like light panels, like I've discussed in the Hamilton penalty, light panels dotted around the track. They were green, but that green was for Bottas to know that you can go whenever you like before the safety car line. And obviously once one car goes thinking that it was all green, everyone else reacts to that. And then everyone did, such as Sainz, Giovinazzi, Latifi, as well as Grosjean, pictured here. But then when they all suddenly realise, oh bugger, no one's actually going, by the time Latifi has dodged out of the way, Sainz is already doing racing speed, and then he comes up behind someone that is not doing racing speed, and there's a big crash. So my problem with this incident is the safety car line. It should not have been at the start-finish line. It should have been all the way back at the pit entry, and then this would not have occurred in the slightest. In the slightest. And there was an investigation put out by the FIA, and 12 drivers were warned as a result of this incident, but no further action was taken. Unless something else pops up in the future, I don't feel the need to make an entirely separate video about this incident. But with that out of the way, we will now delve on in to the team reviews, and we start with Bottas. It was kind of his weekend. It was definitely his weekend. First time in his career that he has led all 3 practice sessions of a Grand Prix weekend. He just misses out on pole position due to Ocon spinning, so he couldn't get in his final lap, in which he was going faster and he would have claimed pole position. However, that didn't matter, as he managed to get the better of Lewis Hamilton at start number 1. Then the safety car came out, then the red flag came out, then they did a standing start exactly like they did at Monza, and he lost out. And from there it was a tiny bit processional for about 30 or so laps. He then demanded from his team, pit me onto the opposite tyres that Lewis goes onto. However, a couple of laps later he then complains about vibrations, so they pit him before Lewis, pops Bottas onto the hard tyre, Lewis comes in and goes onto the hard tyre. Which you can understand why they would do that. Whereas if Hamilton had come in first, then yes, Bottas, you can go on an alternate tyre. Then there was the second red flag and the third standing start, in which Bottas again had a crap start, lost a place to Ricciardo even. Ricciardo was up to second at one point, managed to fight back, but in the 13 or so laps after that third standing start, it just wasn't enough time in order to catch Lewis Hamilton. So I feel, had there not been any of this commotion, any of this action, any of this incidents, yes, it would have been Bottas's race. He was comfortably in front of Lewis, and he would have maintained that gap exactly like Lewis did to Valtteri. And speaking of Lewis Hamilton, he did it when it mattered. Career victory number 90. And it is also the first time this year that Mercedes have taken all 44 points available to them. It seems crazy to think that they've won every, or not every race. I was about to say they've won every race. That's a lie. They've only won, 7 out of the 9 races. But you would think at this dominant Mercedes they would have at least had a 1-2 with the fastest lap before. But no, this was the first one. There's not much to say about Lewis Hamilton apart from he didn't make a particularly good start on the very first race start, and then race start number 2 and race start number 3 he did, and he did enough to stay in front. And now we move to Alex Albon. Third time is the charm. Finally, a podium contender, podium finisher, there you go, podium finisher. And honestly, it was a solid race from Albon, some mega overtakes, and he couldn't do it on strategy to try and get in front, so he had to do it on track. And boy oh boy, did he do it very well on track, getting past Ricciardo around the outside of turn 1 as well for the podium. That was awesome. However, not to take away from his podium, as that's pretty cool, he then said on the radio after, "Thank you guys for sticking with me." To which Christian Horner responded in the post-race interview saying, "Perhaps Alex Albon is too nice for Formula 1. He doesn't have that cutthroat, I want this victory, I want everything now kind of attitude. He is a bit too nice," which is perhaps why he hasn't been performing very well this year. But anyway, moving away from Alex Albon and to Renault. Daniel Ricciardo was a podium contender. He looked mega quick in the opening stages of the race and held P3 for a while. However, it was of course the red flag incidents that sort of turned it on its head. As after restart number 3, he did not have any well, he did. He managed to get past Bottas as Bottas had a bad start, held him off for about 2 or 3 laps, and then another 2 or 3 laps time passed and Albon managed to get past. So no, he didn't have pace, but yes he did. If the race ended at lap 52, then he'd have been absolutely fine. And then we have the racing point in P5, Sergio Perez just avoiding all of the trouble really, just didn't really get involved. There wasn't much towards his day, apart from possibly a small little collision with Carlos Sainz at the very opening lap before the first lap incident. But other than that, he just kept himself out of trouble. Unlike Lance Stroll, a massive off, a huge monumental crash for Lance Stroll, coming out of Arrabbiata 2 at about 170 kilometers an hour, 200 kilometers an hour, and he had a rear left puncture in a right hand corner and straight off into the barriers. And that racing point was buggered. It caught fire, and it caught fire in a big way, and the marshals, like in the picture, literally ripped that bodywork off to get at the burning engine with their fire extinguishers. So all in all, I would say a 50-50 day for the Racing Point team. And to another team that had a bit of a 50-50 day, McLaren. Lando Norris, P6, again staying out of trouble, much like Sergio Perez. He didn't really seem to have the pace, and neither did McLaren as a team. They didn't really have the pace this weekend, did they? And to see them P6, that is not that bad at all, but considering we had 8 retirements, that sort of boosted it. And again, another team that sort of kept themselves out of trouble, AlphaTauri, another 50-50 team. Kvyat getting, I think his best result of the season so far, P7 and 6 points, whereas Gasly, Monza Master Gasly, retired on lap 1. I don't really think Kvyat was actually mentioned much during the race, as it was the first race I actually watched live this season. The first race I watched live. It was incredible. And it was very worth it. Very worth it? That didn't make sense. But we get to Ferrari now. The Burgundy Ferrari. Not too bad of a livery. And I've just realised I thought this picture was of normal Sebastian Vettel. But that front wing, that's not normal. Yes, he did have a little bit of an incident. He did run into Carlos Sainz, as Carlos Sainz spun on lap 1 with the yellow flag and the safety car incident, and then Vettel just sort of bounced over Sainz's front wing, breaking his. But anyway, both Ferraris in the top 10, the first time in Vettel's career that he has finished P10 as well, which I thought was quite interesting. He's had, 249, 250 race starts, something like that, and the first time that he has finished 10th. But overall, not a particularly bad day for the Scuderia. We had Leclerc at P3 at one point after the first restart, after the second standing start, but he ultimately fell back as that Ferrari just doesn't quite have the pace yet. But Alfa Romeo, hello, points again. Kimi Raikkonen, P9 and 2 points, his first points of the season so far. He did get a 5-second penalty though, otherwise he would have been in front of Leclerc, and that was an incident involving the pit entry, and he crossed the white line, similar to what Hamilton did in Germany of 2019 as well. Got a 5-second penalty and dropped himself down low. And as I've mentioned before, Giovinazzi crashed out in the safety car restart incident in the opening stages of the race, but ultimately not a bad race for Alfa Romeo at all. But Williams definitely had a bad race. I was expecting points after all of this carnage. I think everybody was expecting points for George Russell. He was comfortably running P9 and holding off Sebastian Vettel up until Lance Stroll had his crash. And in the final 13-14 lap sprint to the finish, he was not able to maintain that position and he did fall back. It's a shame. It's a massive shame. I think Crofty said in the commentary that he's in the top 6 drivers to have the most race starts without scoring a point, which for the GP2 or the F2 champion, that's such a bad statistic to have, but it's just the car that he's in at the moment. And then lastly, Haas. Haas, where do I begin? DNF for Magnussen, caught up in the safety car restart incident, and Grosjean P12. Bear in mind it was literally a sprint finish, a sprint 14 lap finish to the end, and everyone's on the soft tyre, and he finished 9.6 seconds off of Russell. That's just slow. I don't think Grosjean really deserves a seat in Formula 1 if he can't outpace a Williams or an Alfa Romeo or any of these types of cars. He's in an okay car. It's not the worst car on the grid, but he always puts it last. And with that relatively long race review done and dusted, we'll have a look at what effect it's had on the championships. Lewis Hamilton now 55 points clear of Valtteri Bottas, who is now 25 points clear of Max Verstappen, courtesy of his 2 non-points finishes. Lando Norris is now P4, ahead of Albon, then Stroll, Ricciardo, Leclerc, Perez and Gasly are your top 10. He has slipped back as well a little bit. And in the constructors, there is no change at all. Mercedes, from Red Bull, from McLaren, from Racing Point, from Renault, Ferrari, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, who double their point score from last race, Haas, and Williams. And just a bit of a visual representation of all of this data here for you guys. Lewis Hamilton comfortably out in front from Bottas, from Verstappen, and the jumbled mess of the midfield. And in the constructors, much the same. Mercedes leaps and bounds in front of Red Bull, who are actually edging a bit closer to that midfield, and then you have the jumbled mess of the midfield. However, something that I have been doing for a little while is tweeting pictures of the Formula 1.5 season, and the way I've done this is I have literally just excluded Mercedes and Max Verstappen from every single race so far, bumped everybody else up and given them their new scores, even the fastest lap point. And we have Alex Albon taking the championship lead for the 3rd time this year, first time since Belgium off of Lance Stroll. And it is extremely close for that top 3, and also down to, I would say, who is that on 82 points? Let me just move along. Perez. So the top 6 are extremely close together. And in the constructors, it is still Racing Point not dominating the way actually, but still maintaining their constructors' point lead. And with that all done and dusted, that is the end of my race weekend review for the manic Tuscan Grand Prix. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.